If you ask me, what is your list of favorite things? I'm like, oh, well, in a list of ascending order of greatness, my friends, my family, Wheel of Goddamn Time. I've waited 2 goddamn years for this video. And you know what I've been waiting 2 goddamn years on? Your slow ass reading. I have been wanting to get Austin to read this goddamn series for 2 years. And finally he reads the first book. This is episode 65 of the Tutor Ramble podcast, and I'm goddamn Richard. This slow ass is Austin.
I'm gonna have to bleep that, I'm Austin. You tore the plushie off the table, and mind you, viewers, listeners,
I'm excited.
Just before I clicked the record button, I'll have you know, he was going, yeah, so very, very monotone, very calm, and that's what I heard as soon as we clicked
I've been bottling this feeling up for 2 years.
He shocked me with that. And Richard's this you're getting this reaction if you don't know, if this is your first time to the channel. As you can see, he loves Wheel of Time.
It's my favorite thing.
It's his favorite thing ever.
It's the thing. Like, if you ask, what is your list of favorite things? I'm like, oh, well, in a list of ascending order of greatness, my friends, my family, Wheel of Goddamn Time.
I'm surprised we're third. I'll take that. Wow. I'm very...
Fine, sorry. My friends, my money, my family, then Wheel of Time.
That's better. Where's the pod hit on that list?
Well, if it actually made money, it would go third.
So, Rich...
wasn't a goddamn hole in my pocket.
I have a feeling we're going to have to do a lot of bleeping this episode. You're very excited.
I am excited.
This is your favorite thing ever. This is book 1 of the Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World. I finally read it. And just so we can get this clear early on in the video, we've done these before. This is a spoiler-free for the first 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll get into spoilers. But here's what's special. Richard has already read all the books. He's rereading them with me. I'm reading them for the first time. We're going to have a 14-long series. This is going to span I don't know how long with my slow ass. I have to bleep that, but that's, just to quote the man himself, it's probably going to take us a couple centuries before we get through this.
I'm hoping that we do at least 1 book a month.
We'll see if we keep to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was 300,000 words. And it's a big book, but also while we're reading other stuff, so we fit it in there. Obviously, you're excited. This is going to be a start to a long journey. Everybody strap in. Going to start spoiler-free. Get into spoilers later. Is there anything you want to say and get out before we even talk about this book? Just what Wheel of Time means to you. What does Wheel of Time mean to you?
I just want to get off the bat, despite the technical ratings of the very first book, the reason I'm so excited is not necessarily because of this very first book. It's the series as a whole. It is a series that is greater than the sum of its parts. And though I may have criticisms for it, in many ways, those imperfections make it better because it sticks in my head. And I don't even know if to call them imperfections. That's the thing. Everyone who loves the Wheel of Time can also list all of their complaints about it, and yet for some reason at the end of the day, it's still their favorite thing ever. It's a weird, magical thing about it. This series does some things that I don't think ever can be repeated. It does the chosen one trope, the best that it ever will be. It does world building, second only to Tolkien, and I have not found anything else that comes close to world building and actualization of a world and cultures and history. It is a masterfully done series, and I'm enjoying it. I think more on the second read through. So, wow. Very excited.
Well, that's good. We're going to look back at that clip too, 14 books later. The cool thing for us, hey, viewer, you're also here, but just so you know, this is for us. This is more for you, Rich, but it's very cool because at the end of this, you can look back to all of our reviews and see that's how I was thinking at the time. And so for you, it's going to be great because you can look at rereading it. You'll now read the series twice and have a video file of it. And then for me, I'll be able to see book by book. I have no spoilers, so I don't know what I'm getting into next book.
It'll be a really fun thing to see back on how you thought. So I'm actually quite excited to see your reactions to things. And this is actually fun for when we first started this whole podcast. A big part of it was talking about, we could do a read-along series of Wheel of Time and have that archived for ourselves for years to come. And so it's a big deal for me.
Yeah.
But let's get right into it.
Okay. So spoiler-free review. We're starting spoiler-free, of course. We will give you spoiler warning beforehand. And Rich, I'm going to give the mantle to you to spoiler-free this because, hey, I will jump in when need be.
Okay. The Eye of the World starts off, it is a book series that takes a lot from, it is an homage to the Fellowship of the Ring. And Robert Jordan took that story and said, how would I do it differently? How would I think this whole prophecy and chosen one would actually work? If there's a prophecy of the chosen one who's supposed to save the world, would everyone accept that? Would everyone be behind it? Or would there be a lot of infighting and different factions, and would people be scared of just that fact of the world? So this is your standard farm boy story, creating a fellowship and going on a quest out into the world. And that's what you start off with. And by like book 2, book 3, it starts becoming into its own. A very unique series.
And just to add on, this is obvious, this is why you didn't say it, but this is one of the most famous fantasy series ever. So it's like Lord of the Rings, then this. Pretty much if you're a fantasy fan, you've read
especially
these books.
American.
And modern fantasy, yeah.
For American fantasy specifically, I think it is the biggest American fantasy series.
Yep. And so if it's also has a new show, which I think we should make an episode on that too, where I should watch the show because now I can watch it. I've been staying away from spoilers because it's only on book 1, season 1, right? So we can watch that, maybe do a little episode on that as well. But as far as spoiler free goes, Farm Boy, it's your classic fantasy and the homage to Tolkien, as you said. Well said. Now, anything else with a spoiler free summary, or do you want to get right into rating and then we'll get into a long, lengthy discussion?
I think we should get right into the rating.
Okay. Spoiler free rating. What did you give The Eye of the World, book 1 of Wheel of Time, out of 10? Stamp it. This will be here for a long time.
All of this excitement, and I give the first book a 6.85.
Okay.
I actually did have to re-rate it, and it's unfortunate because I see a bunch of the seeds in here where I'm like, oh, this is paid off very well later.
Yeah.
But I can't give that credit to this book immediately because the seeds are planted, but you don't get that in this book. So I think it's a good start, but it doesn't lean into the strengths the Wheel of Time normally is known for.
Okay. So you said it perfectly at the beginning too, that the series isn't the sum of its parts. So you may think certain books aren't as good, but then when you look at it as the whole piece of it, it's just the best.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very happy to hear that because I gave The Eye of the World 5 being average.
Yeah.
I went through each category. If you don't know how our category rating systems work, you'll see throughout this video, and we actually have a link in our description. I gave The Eye of the World a 4.4 out of 10. So we're gonna have a great discussion, I hope.
Oh, Lord.
And if there's one word I could say in the spoiler-free review for The Eye of the World, I want to say a couple things before we get into spoilers. So you're still here for spoiler-free. I want to say this one. I will read on. I'll read the rest of the books. Number 1, I'll read them because you love it so much. Number 2, I'll read it because we monetarily need this series to do well. Number 3, I think it can only go up from here for me personally. I think if I'm giving this in the 4 range, it can only get better. Now, also mind you, so 5 is our average, so I did give it a 4.4. We'll go category by category. The other thing I just want to say, if I could say 2 words for The Eye of the World, it would be, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, Wheel of Time fans. Listen, I want to say this before I say the 2 words, is the chances you clicking on this video is you're a Wheel of Time fan, I'm sure. So hopefully you'll see my reaction throughout the series and it'll get better and better. I start here and then by book 10, I'm going, oh, I heard that's the slog. Okay, by book 14, I'll be like, wow, I'll go crazy. But as of right now, the 2 words I'd use are extremely underwhelmed. And I'll leave it at that.
I'm on it. As much of a fan as I am of it, I'm not as upset with that rating as I typically would be. I understand. You've been reading some really great books so far. I understand that this is not like the most stellar start. I think there's great seeds there, but you don't see how it just doesn't develop in the first book.
Yeah.
I think the second book is like tens of times magnitude.
I can't wait to get into that.
Like I'm also ahead of you on the reread.
I'll get there, okay? I'll get there.
But that makes sense.
Yeah. So with that, any further ado, you want to give a spoiler warning? Okay.
Spoiler warning, don't continue if you haven't read. Go read it, or if you don't care, I guess continue, but come on.
Okay. The category system, what did you give emotional impact out of 10?
I gave it a 6. 6 out of 10.
Above average.
Yeah. And I can see myself like right at if I was I'm thinking nostalgia and my memory is also giving it at least a point.
Yeah.
If I'm reading it for the first time, I'm probably giving it a 5.
I feel more comfortable. So I gave it a 3.5 for emotional impact. It's my lowest of the categories. I'll say that.
Wow.
So
you really disliked the book.
It was emotionally speaking, it was the lowest category. So it's it's active toward dislike for emotion. There's other stuff that raises it a bit, but what's interesting to me is you're an uber fan of this series, and even you're giving it in the 6 range, which kind of doesn't confirm it 100%. I'm sure some people love the book. It's a classic fantasy, and this holds dear to many people. But it confirms me, you giving it a 6, that my 4 range is like, okay, if I'm not a fanatic about the series, and I'm thinking it's just not my cup of tea, it's below average, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I understand.
You give it. So you giving it the 6 or so, emotionally speaking. Why is it a 6? Is it one of your lower ones in the series?
Definitely.
It's
probably the lowest.
Okay.
Because
that's music to my ears.
Here's the thing. Everyone calls the slog. I really don't consider it much of a slog. Truly. I just think the books are kind of split up oddly, where it focuses on one specific element and then leaves the others to the wayside, and that's picked up in later books. And so people feel like disjointed and like, oh, we spent so long on this. I was waiting for this other character's perspective, and we didn't get the whole book. And so they think it's the slog. Okay. And I just read fast enough that it didn't feel like a slog.
I think I have to retract something a little bit. I've been being a little too nice. I just wanted to say this. You have bad taste. You're an awful reader. I gotta get more. We gotta get more reactions here for TikTok or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I just have to throw that in there. I'll clip that, and then we can act like we're enemies, and then whatever. Okay. So yeah. So emotionally speaking, the number one thing I'll get into, and this isn't a surprise to I don't think anyone. It just affected me more. Is I want to say this. 2 things can be true at once. I think it is an homage and a tribute to Tolkien, but I also think it is derivative of Tolkien, and derivative toward its. I think it's the closest you can get to plagiarism without being illegal. I think it's a step away from the Tolkien estate being able to go, wait a second, it's that close. And if you don't mind, I have a list of things of the commonalities.
I do disagree with you mainly because it's very clear from Robert Jordan actually talking about it, and he actually did intend I'm taking the Fellowship of the Ring and putting a twist on it. Yeah. And I want to see how would this story play out if this factor of the world was different.
His thing
and
was
that's his story.
His
which
twist
is
on it,
perfectly fair.
Right. His twist on it was if the whole world, didn't believe the dark one's there. That if instead the twist on it is not everyone believes that it's the end of times.
Well, mainly just a common occurrence with the Chosen One stories. Everyone kind of like follows the hero. Like, oh, the hero has come back, and all right, we'll follow the hero to beat the enemy. And Robert Jordan kind of saw like that's probably not how it actually happened.
So, do you think with the Eye of the World, it's not very derivative of Tolkien?
Derivative of the this negative connotation? No, I think it's very clear homage. And
sure,
derivative would be. Yeah, it's basically a copy, and he doesn't give credit, and he doesn't talk like, oh no, it's my completely original thing. It's like, no, you're just being derivative. Homage is clear, like he puts in very clear Easter eggs of like, yes, this is an homage to Tolkien.
That's where I agree and disagree. I think it could be those 2 things at once. It's an homage and a tribute to Tolkien. He makes that very clear, but it's also very similar to the point of, as a reader, It's I've seen it before. I've seen it before. I've seen it before. Not just I've seen it before. I've seen it in one book before. So you don't think those two things can be true? Because derivative, it could be a negative context or connotation. That's the word, right? I know words. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So putting a negative connotation on that, would you say a better word to use is it's very similar to Tolkien? Like what would be a word that's acceptable to use?
It just has very similar aspects to it. That's
so
definitely the case.
Yeah, you giving it a 6 and respecting the series and it being your favorite, I'd see why you'd say that. To me, I'm reading going, all right, there's a lot of and I can go I have a list of them that I wanted to put together here. So this is all the things that the Lord of the Rings, or do you mind if I go on this?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the Lord of the Rings and the Eye of the World. This is all the things that they've had in common that I've noted down when I was reading, and I also looked up what other people found. And I was like, oh, there's another one added to the list. So, and interrupt me when you will, but we've got, of course, you have your chosen one, black and white morality. That's basic in lots of books, so it's not specifically just Tolkien. But you have the Shire and Emond's Field, the two rivers, are both quaint, small places removed from the large scoped world where only rumors and so forth whisper in. You have this long-awaited village festival in the beginning of the book, like Bilbo's party or Beltane, dancing and celebration and whatnot. You have both our tobacco-producing homelands, the Shire, the two rivers, Emond's Field. Instead of pipeweed, it's tobacco. You have the Shire Gandalf arise with the news of the outside world. In Emond's Field, it's a Gleeman arise with news from the outside world. You have, until one day, the Black Riders in the Fellowship, the Nazgul, but in this, it's the Fade, the Meadral, or the Black Riders, the darkness and shadow, threaten Emond's Field. You have this evil soldier race, the Trolls. In Lord of the Rings, you have the Trollocs here. Sure, Fellowship gets things from other places, but just keeping on this tangent here, you have the flying monster, the fell beast, or like the Drakkar. You have the Fellowship. There were 9 in the Fellowship. In Wheel of Time, there's 8, but you have your king without crown, Lan, Aragorn. You have, your ranger warrior. You have Moraine, your wizard, like Gandalf. You even have, instead of Merry and Pippin, you have Matt and Perrin. Like the alliteration, I was like, okay, that's close. And you have this peculiar neighboring village. Instead of Bree, it's Taran Ferry. You have this ferry crossing in Chase and Buckleberry Ferry, just like Taran Ferry, I believe, right?
Yep.
And you have this great evil monster threatens the protagonist, and another member of the party, Gandalf, sacrifices himself. In this case, Tom sacrifices himself, and it's revealed he's alive later as well at the end of this book. And then there's the Cursed Ruins, Moria instead of Shadar Logoth. You have the Mountain of Evil instead of Mount Doom. It's Mount Doom with an H. I mean, that's very clear. And then you have...
Say that again?
So the Mountain of Evil, Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings. In Wheel of Time, it's Mount Doom, Doom with an H in it. And then you have the Wastelands of Evil, Mordor. This you have Shaiol Ghul, and then you have the Dark One, Sauron. This one you have another Dark One.
That also, those are separate places.
Oh, those are, which ones? Shaiol Ghul?
No, so Shaiol Ghul is one place, and then the Wastelands are 2 separate places.
No, I'm saying a wasteland of evil is Shaiol Ghul, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Mordor's a wasteland.
But the Aiel Wastes are different. I thought that's what you're referencing. I
was just saying wasteland in general.
Okay.
And then you even have the Eye of Sauron. This is literally called the Eye of the World. You have main characters end up encountering people who live in...
I don't think that's much of a actual connection.
I think he's making that connection with the Eye, I believe.
I don't really think so.
Okay, but then you have main characters end up encountering a race of people who live in groves and revere trees, and they're not as hasty as the other races. And you have the statues of the old king Arangoth, statues of Reverend Arianel. You have the larger historical context of both worlds, where there's different ages that I believe in this one, I don't know what age it is specifically on which
Third
Keel.
age.
So just like with Tolkien's, it's the Third Age as well. You also have, instead of Gollum, this is very similar. Instead of Gollum, you have Fane, who's been following them the whole time, has this split personality corrupted by the Dark One, and is the one that's been tracking them season of the end. And at one point, their above ground is blocked, and they're forced through a dark, dangerous underground place. Instead of the Mines of Moria, it's the Ways, and that's just what I was able to find.
I can see why you're rating it lower, but I can imagine as you're reading, you're picking up this and going and writing it down like, oh, that's another similar, where I'm just kind of speeding through, and like I notice them sometimes, but I don't give a shit. So I'm just going like, oh, neat, and I keep going. And I can see like that was a friction point for you.
Well, not all these are the ones I wrote down.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote down probably like a quarter of these that I noticed. I was like, oh, that's the same. Then I was like, then I looked up is how similar is Lord of the Rings to Wheel of Time, and other people were giving up examples. And so there was that many similarities to where, and then obviously your large themes are very similar to you have your chosen one, and the twist that Robert Jordan does, he adds there's this magic system with the male and female half, and he adds that chosen one prophecy of like not everyone's on board at the beginning. To me, at least in this book, it wasn't unique and different enough to compel me to go in this book that it's pushing the genre forward. It's doing something crazy new and interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I was just so of the things that Robert Jordan added in this book in particular. By the way, rest in peace. He's I'm sure, and big reason I'm also reading this and excited because Sanderson ends it, because after what was it, book 11, he passed away, unfortunately. And so I know I've heard great things as the series goes on. So I am excited to get through. As much as I am being negative right now, I have to stay on it to create friction between us. Well, go ahead.
You are completely right. The Eye of the World is the least unique. It is the closest thing to like classic fantasy. It is definitely a big homage to Fellowship of the Ring. Clear, like very clear. Book 2, right out of the gate, incredibly different. And I will say some of those differences of even in the Eye of the World, there are stark differences between the two rivers and
the Shire.
I think just the people themselves are vastly different, like how stubborn and kind of violent they can really be, and just this actual awkward stubbornness and confrontation that they have is very different. Okay. They're much stronger people than the Shire.
Oh yeah, you can't mimic the Shire. And not just that, I think it also speaks volumes, at least for me. Emond's Field, we spent a lot more time there than we did the Shire, and I feel a lot less attached to Emond's Field, at least for the amount of page time that was used before we. So hopefully in the future we do, but I didn't.
That's actually okay. I don't really consider this too much of a spoiler, really.
Be very careful, please. I know. Please.
A difference, a significant difference with Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time is Lord of the Rings, you leave the Shire and then
there's the scorching at the end.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's a place to leave and a place to come home. That's it. With Wheel of Time, you actually get time with the people there over time.
Interesting.
Okay. It is Emond's Field is actually a significant part of the story going forward too. It is not just a place to leave and go home.
You know how this is a serious book review? Like usually we try to banter back and forth. We're going like into this book. Yeah. This is like this. We have no time for jokes, guys. I'm sorry. This episode we're actually interested in what each other have to say this time.
Yeah.
So I want to.
It's so hard because I agree with you on all these points. It just is not a negative to me.
That's the thing I've been seeing, right? It's people online. People will either say it's an homage and tribute, which I agree, and then people say it's derivative. I agree. So that when I'm looking at it, I'm going, of course he's inspired by Tolkien. It doesn't do enough different for me to go, okay, you were here's something that does something different. For example, what I'd say excels the genre. And this is a small example. We're going to be reviewing this very soon, but Red Rising, we won't go into Red Rising, but Red Rising has a very similar element to Hunger Games.
Very
similar. It has so I don't want to give anything else on the spoilers for that, but it's a dystopian novel with that, but it does so much different, which we can get into, that it's a completely different book, completely different culture. It's like, it's new. It uses its past foundation and creates something new and exciting and boom, and it's awesome. So with this, I just saw a lot of the old and not enough of the new to justify the length of this and what was put in. Of course, it's a great, you could tell a lot of effort, better than anything I could do, you know?
Yeah, we'll get into it, but I think just writing style, I really enjoy his style and the prose and how it's written. It's very enjoyable for me to like go through. The dialogue is always just fun for me, but I want to actually get into characters right out of the gate.
Okay, and nothing else with emotional impact? Do you want, because I said that I used the whole time talking about the commonality. So is there anything else on emotion?
I feel positive about it, but I liked it while I was reading it, and I liked it especially more because I can see the seeds that will later flower.
Okay.
I noticed some things here that I didn't even remember and going, oh, damn, he was setting that up from the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so there's a bunch of that. And even I'm remembering back to when I first started reading it, and I was, I think, more similar to you, where I'm like, it was okay. I'll read the second. I had nothing better to do.
I will say, though, if you didn't highly recommend this, and I didn't know Sanderson ended, just because Sanderson's my favorite writer, I don't think I'd continue. So after the first book, like, let's say you didn't exist. Oh, that would be great. Oh my God, can we make that a thing? But let's say you didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I was just reading this. I didn't have a podcast to make content on and whatever. I don't think I'd continue. Which is why I think this will be more interesting for me, because I'm going to force myself to continue reading.
Yeah.
And then maybe, let's say I finish the second book, I'm like, I'm in now. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure you will be.
Okay.
By second book, you're going to be in.
Okay.
If you're not in by like the fourth, I would tell you to stop.
Okay.
That's the cutoff point for me. Because the fourth book is arguably the best book of the series.
Oh.
With the others being very close, but it's like, it's close. Fourth book is master. It has a couple tens for me in the categories.
Wow.
Yeah. It does some things masterfully.
Okay.
But I want to give my character score for this.
What's your character score?
A 6.75.
6.75, okay?
Yeah.
I gave it a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
So characters, go on with characters. That's higher than your emotional score, so you liked it more than you felt with the book?
Yeah, I think all the characters are necessarily pretty good except for Matt.
Really?
Matt is
that's surprising. I'm very
later
surprised
becomes
by
one of my
that.
favorite characters. But I was frustrated with him in the first book, and I just don't.
Me too, but I'm surprised you said just Matt though.
I mean,
I think the obvious one's Rand. Unless you think differently, because you've read the books already, so you know where Rand goes.
It's hard to separate it from me.
It's hard to separate from you, but for me, I just know this book, Rand, and this is one of the most negative points of the book, is Rand is very, very dull, very bland. And he doesn't have much going for him in this book. There's not much else I could say. There's nothing really to critique other than there was nothing there to critique because he's just there. And he likes Egwene. Actually, the best points with Rand, I think, in the book were with Matt when they were pretending to be Gleeman.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
That was fun. And I was getting to know the characters, and it seemed like there was something going there. Oh, I thought you were yawning. I'm like, don't yawn during your Wheel of Time review.
No.
But it was a steez. Okay.
But yeah, I really enjoyed all the points between Rand and Tom. Tom, Rand, and Matt. I like all that, but my favorite character of the Emmonsfield folk in book 1 is definitely Perrin.
I can see that.
I've just the quiet, patient, large guy, and just how much that he's the one character out of all the guys that like isn't pushed around as much by the women to like in a ridiculous degree. Like Egwene and Nynaeve are a little bossy. They could be annoying and very frustrating at times. And I liked how Perrin, like, sometimes, yeah, he's pushed along and kind of manhandled a little bit. But there's occasionally where he's clearly thought about his position and people respect him for that. When he's made up his mind, Egwene actually listens to him. She doesn't listen to anybody. She will occasionally listen to Perrin.
So Perrin's your favorite.
I just liked how his character is done. But else, okay. This only comes from the reread.
Okay.
But oh my god, I have so much sympathy for Moraine.
Mm.
Oh my god, I'm sitting there just going, oh, poor Moraine, these stupid farm children. God damn it.
It's a deal with all of them, yeah.
Because when I first read it, I'm on the Emmonsfield folks side. I'm like, who is this Moraine? Who is she?
Oh, can we stay on that point?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm a first-time reader.
Uh-huh.
And that I found very confusing. Emotionally confusing. Because I wasn't on either of their side. Because while I was reading, and tell me, go back to your first read of this, but as I was reading it, they were told at the beginning that Aes Sedai are untrustworthy.
Yeah.
And not to trust Moraine, not to do any of this, but they were forced to. They were forced out of Emmonsfield, and they had to. They were put in this situation. But as they were forced into Moraine's company and going on this journey, it was like she was only doing good things and helping them. So I get maybe there's an ulterior motive, but I'm sitting there going, okay, they're not supposed to trust her, but clearly she's not killing them. Clearly it's not like clearly she's not a horrible
well, they all have different they all distrust Aes Sedai for different reasons. And you find that
do you find that all in this book, or did I miss that?
No, it's in this book. So why does Nynaeve not like Moraine? Because she's an Aes Sedai?
Yes. No, because taking the kids away.
Nope.
Right?
Partly, yes. That started off, but what was the other part?
Oh, Lan?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why she doesn't like Moraine.
That part's later, but the first part, it's like, oh, they're taking the kids, yeah.
Then you look at Rand. Rand's distrust of Aes Sedai is far more just, there's a certain stubbornness to him. And not only that she's Aes Sedai and I don't trust her, she's taking Egwene. And the fact that, because of her, now Egwene has to become an Aes Sedai and has to become, Aes Sedai witch. She's taking Egwene from me.
Can I put another negative in that? Because the reason why, again, going on, I'm more negative, I'm sorry, just on the whole thing. But the reason why I didn't like that as much is I love the scene at the beginning where Egwene couldn't decide whether to braid her hair or not, so kind of covered it between Moraine and Nynaeve when they were both there. And that kind of dropped off into the book a bit, where I didn't feel that cool conflict I felt at the beginning, where I saw Egwene teetering and tottering between the two, where it didn't feel as important as it got further into the book for me.
I think most of that is when she's out there, when she's just with Moraine, she's now leaning on like, hey, she's unbraided. And then Nynaeve comes back and now she's embarrassed and she's like, that's when she struggles. It's depending on who she's around and her perception.
Yeah, I noticed it at the beginning and it didn't seem to increase in stakes as the story went on. It didn't lead to anything by the end.
To be fair, that scene is cut out from the actual story. That's an additional scene. It's not actually in the book.
Did I read a different version?
Mm-hmm.
This is like a longer version?
Well, that Egwene scene in the beginning is cut from the main one.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It wasn't in my copy.
I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the very beginning of the book.
Mm-hmm. I'm
not talking about that.
Which scene?
I'm talking about the scene where Nynaeve first arrives. Nynaeve arrives and she's hiding her hair because she's like she wants to appease them both. She doesn't know, she's struggling. It's a conflict. Yeah. Like, good, that's good. And then after that, I was like, where'd that go?
Mainly just Egwene picked a side. She kind of made a decision
with Moraine.
Yeah.
But I was like,
she did. She made a decision. Also, beyond that, it's more. There's no real question anymore. I have to go. Mm-hmm. I'm going. And at that point, she does just.
When did she decide?
Basically, when Moraine, like, you'll die if you don't, and then Nynaeve actually accepts that.
Okay.
When Nynaeve no longer is like, okay, you're coming home, because that's when she's kind of more.
Yeah, when she was just into got it.
But then Nynaeve's like, hey, I'm gonna come with you.
Yeah.
Then that conflict is kind of gone.
Got it.
She's going. The decision's made for her.
Okay. I guess I perceived that by the end she was still going through it. I didn't.
Different conflicts come. I think that specific conflict is gone.
Okay.
Because the decision's made for her. She has to leave. There's no going back to braiding her hair.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to Tar Valon.
Mm.
So, but other problems come up. But getting into characters is each one of them dislikes or is distrustworthy of Aes Sedai for different reasons. And many of them don't make sense in complete logic, but they make sense to the character, and it's kind of more consistent with the characters, even if it may be frustrating for readers. So Rand doesn't really like Aes Sedai mainly because of prejudice, and is hyper fixated on control. Like, the magic thing and all the history, like, sure, that's one thing, but the thing he's always fixated on is, what is she doing? She's going to try and control me. She's going to try and manipulate me without me knowing. I'm not going to dance to her tune. He does not like being manipulated and controlled. Then Matt is just fearful of the magic thing. He's like, get me out of this whole witchcraft and voodoo. I want out. No. Perrin is just generally cautious, but pretty quickly is the most logical of like, nah, Moraine's kind of on our side. We need to get back. Like, I'm cautious of her because she's a stranger, and negative connotation, sure.
I guess those conflicts didn't stick out or work for me because I never believed them.
You didn't believe them?
No, because I'm just looking at what I'm being shown, and I'm constantly just being shown, okay, obviously they're forced out of here, and Moraine's helping them get to this place. It's, you know what it is? It's just too classical as well with all the derivativeness of I don't expect it. He doesn't have me expecting it to go with a twist of like Moraine being evil. It's completely out the window of that being a possibility because of how basic the plot has been thus far. Maybe I could be proven wrong. Next book, something happens like that, but there's nothing ever to give me a hint of these farm boys are like one of the suspicions is right. I'm like, no. So you read it on your first read and were on the farm boy side. I was the complete opposite, where I was well, not opposite of I was on Moraine's side. I was just very much on the okay, this is part of where I'm supposed to be suspicious, but I'm not.
I was suspicious too, but that's not really what I was getting out of it, because I'm looking at these characters, and even though I disagree with them, I'm just seeing their perspective.
But you
like,
said
I'm
the
not,
first time
I'm not
you,
particularly.
but the first time you read it, you were on their side and going like,
I was
were
both,
suspicious of
I was
her.
both. Of like, yeah, I was a bit suspicious of her. Like
that. Yeah, that's where I was different, because you read that and were looking at it going, oh, I'm on the farm boy side. Like, yeah, why be? I'm
sitting there going, I'm frustrated with Moraine, going like, why isn't she telling them the truth? Why isn't she being like, there's some stuff like, why is she keeping this stuff back? She's being a little weird. Like, yeah, she's clearly on their side, but for what reason? And there's something that she's keeping back, and it's stupid for her to do so. Why? And then the others, it's like,
oh, you thought that.
More just kind of being a bully over, kind of just being a bully over these young kids, and you're kind of going, why? In hindsight, I'm like, yeah, she should. She knows more. They need to listen to her. Stop asking so many questions, you goddamn idiot farm kids. But
that's in hindsight for you.
In hindsight.
Jeez, okay.
But then when reading, you kind of go, okay, they are acting unreasonably. Like they're clearly so sheltered and superstitious and all these things that it's clearly flaws. And so like I'm watching them kind of get over it. Sure. And seeing these characters make objectively poor decisions and understanding why they make poor decisions, but I'm okay with that.
Okay, I'm surprised on your first read you thought that. For my first read, I didn't think that at all. I thought it was clear with how stupid Matt was. I mean, why tell these boys anything? And obviously it's such a massive world, and there's a lot they're not supposed to know. It wasn't one of those I can't tell you yet tropes, which I hate. It didn't lean in toward that as much, because it's like they just met, and there's a lot of magic I don't understand. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of bigger stuff I don't understand, and I'm sure I will eventually. But I was just like, yeah, of course. These guys have been idiots so far. I'm not. Why would I trust it? And plus, me not liking loving the farm boys, I should say, and Rand, I didn't care for him to know anyway. So I was never I was never going like the farm boys are right because Rand is bland. That's all I was thinking the whole time.
But okay. Out of all the characters, who is your favorite? If you had to pick one.
If I had to pick,
there was no one you liked at all? You didn't enjoy any of them?
They all had something, I guess Tom.
Okay.
If I had to pick. But
didn't like Lan?
I didn't love Lan. Because whenever I looked at Lan, I was like, that's Aragorn. But I wasn't emotionally really invested in any character. There wasn't anything to hook me into someone's journey yet. I didn't know what was there to get me really rooting for somebody. Obviously, I don't want the dark one to win. Like, yeah, of course. But there's nothing to hook me to a story quite yet. There's no standout. I gave it a 4 out of 10. It's like a clear 4 because, hey, 5 would be like there was nothing compelling me forward throughout it. I thought there were the most, I guess the best thing for the characters for me to give it my favorite thing about it. I loved the scenes where Matt and Rand, I said this earlier, but we're going around being gleeman based on what Tom taught them, and making it from end to end, and the dagger affecting him more and more. It was the dagger, right? Affecting him more and more. I thought that I was starting to get toward the characters. I was starting to get into them a bit, but that. And hey, I love Lord of the Rings, by the way. So I'm all for the walk and talk and all that stuff. So when they were just walking, going end to end, I love that stuff. So I'm not impatient about it. I can go through the whole book. It's just there wasn't a. It's hard to point out something that's not there.
I understand the thing with Rand. I get that book one where I'm enjoying it. I think when I first read it, I thought kind of similarly of it was Rand as a vehicle there. Like the big character thing with him was he's unreasonably stubborn. Like to a significant degree is he hates being manipulated or being felt like he's being manipulated. And when he sticks when he puts his foot down, even if he's objectively wrong, he'll still do it. And he's the most unreasonably stubborn person there out of all of them. And that's his character in book one. That carries forward, of course, but with more stuff going forward, clearly by the end.
Gotcha. Now, for Richard in 2 years from now, when you look back on this, what do you want to say to Richard in 2 years about the characters, just about Wheel of Time right now? Is there anything you want to note out there and be like, hey, Rich, this is where I'm thinking right now?
I mean, I'm just thinking to myself of, I feel bad that you didn't get the hook immediately. I understand it, but it's one of those things of like, just gonna have to wait. It's one long story. This is the first part. It's unfortunate it doesn't hook you. Yep. And I understand it.
And you said Perrin is your favorite?
Perrin was
this book.
This book, he was when I first read it, he was by far my favorite of the Emmons Field characters.
And that held up with a reread?
Of the reread? No, I had different favorites.
Who was different?
Moraine.
Oh, because you looked at that perspective and got
her perspective is very different. Same with Lan. Nynaeve, I loved Nynaeve.
You know what? I'll say that. Nynaeve was my favorite.
Nynaeve is...
In
I
book
think
one.
she is my second favorite of the entire series.
Oh,
her character growth is incredibly interesting.
Okay.
And definitely one of the struggles. She's just a real standout character out of all of them.
That's great. She's the one that felt the most real this book.
Yeah. She's just very unique. And she can be the most frustrating and how rude she can be, but it's all based on, like, she has a deep love for her people. And it's coming from a good place, even if she's wrong and rude.
Can I say one thing, too? It just reminded me of this scene. There's so much in this book. So the worst thing about reading an audiobook, listening to an audiobook, I'll tell you what it is right now. So you know how Matt stupidly went into the whole treasure thing? And obviously Matt being an idiot. It makes it even worse when you're listening to the audiobook and Michael Kramer plays the evil villain's voice. Is like, come here, Matt. Are you coming to the treasure? And I'm listening going, yeah, that's an evil voice, Matt. I wouldn't go follow into the treasure. It's just going, the coins and the daggers, Matt. And I'm just going, so is that an audiobook problem where Michael Kramer
Probably
put on an evil voice where I'm going like, who believes someone that sounds like that? It's like, let me follow the dark figure that's cloaked and I can't see their face and he's got a weird voice. I couldn't do it.
They are idiots. They are farm boy idiots.
I just couldn't believe I was rolling my eyes going, are you kidding me?
I will say book one really sets off your characters of, oh wow, there's nowhere to go but up. Like there's to see where they start and to see where they end is a much bigger task and Herculean change than anything in Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, there's change and very interesting. And I love it. But the amount of a 180 of like, oh, wow, I know where you came from. It's very different.
I'm looking forward to that the most because not just with the characters, it doesn't get worse. It doesn't get worse than book one for me. I hope.
Definitely won't.
So
there's no chance. Maybe you give one of the slog books about the same score. Maybe.
Okay.
I doubt it personally.
Okay.
But yeah, this is the worst. the second book and on, like, the second book is, I would say, at least 3 times better.
At least.
Like 300.
So instead of a 4.4,
better.
it's a 13.2. Did I do that math right?
That's
It's
about
a
right.
13.2 out of 10.
It's spectacular.
Okay,
All of the problems that you have in mostly so. But Matt
keep on characters. So Matt
becomes one of my favorite characters, and he's such a fun character.
Okay.
And
well, don't tease me. Talk this book.
He's
all right?
just so fun. But in this book, oh my god, you just the entire time like idiot Matt. Like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, Moraine.
Am I misremembering?
So sorry
am I
you had to deal with
misremembering
him.
the scene where Rand gave his coin to the boat guy, the ship captain, and Matt's like, "I got one too."
It's like, oh, damn it, Matt.
Why? Don't show your hand. Oh yeah, he's pretty stupid in this book.
But here's the thing: is there's it sucks when characters are stupid and the book doesn't kind of acknowledge that. You know, when like, hey, that was a bad decision, yet the book is trying to tell me that it was a good decision because the writer just couldn't write a more clever.
No, it's clearly meant to be like that.
It's different when the characters are being dumb and it's supposed to, like, they're dumb. And Tom is looking at them going like, you idiots. I could have gotten us there with just a few stories, but no, you had to produce your goddamn silver. Idiots.
For your sake on having this as the archive, what do you think about other characters like Loyal?
Oh, I love Loyal.
I'm surprised that's not your favorite character.
He's up there, but he's not. He's adorable, and he's just not much to talk about like this book.
Okay.
He's a very strong constant in the story. But.
And then what about anybody else that pops up? Like I think I like Master Gil. Master Gil was nice and neat, and he was in Camelin, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, as far as the main cast goes, what do you think about Egwene as well? I'm doing this for your sake, by the way. This is archive for you. So say what you need to say to yourself years from now.
Hey, this is for you too. You're gonna enjoy it.
Book one is not for me, trust me.
No, but it's gonna be fun to look back on.
It will be.
Egwene, of the Emmons Fielders, by the end, she's kind of like my least favorite of them all. I still like her character, but not as much as the rest. Like the least of the best, if you know what I mean.
The least of the 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't dislike her.
All right.
And she definitely has some interesting stuff going in, but her, like the other boys, can sometimes be grating. Can sometimes be frustrating to read. But yeah.
We good on characters?
We're good on characters. Let's move on to plot.
Okay, what'd you give plot out of 10?
This is, I could see lowering it, but the reason I will justify, I gave it a 7 out of 10, mainly because I see all the stuff, all the groundwork he's laid, and I'm going, oh, that's impressive.
Okay.
The groundwork being laid is impressive in this book, and that pushes the plot forward. I can see how actually meticulously laid out the plot is for it to be laid out later. And like, there's so much stuff where you're going, I imagine on the first read through, I'd probably give it a 5.
I gave it a 4, personally.
Yeah.
So I gave it a 4, and I have specific plot points I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
And maybe we can build the conversation from there.
I will let you know if I'm just going to not answer your point.
No, not to answer the question.
Oh, I know. But like,
okay.
I will either like just say like,
got it.
Read later, find out.
Got it. Read and find out. RAFO. We got those acronyms. Yeah. I tried to think of a joke. It didn't work. Didn't work. We're just not in jokey moods today. We're in serious.
No, it's serious. We're in serious. This is Wheel of Time.
It's Wheel of Time. Okay. So the first point, I just have random plot points and stuff that like I didn't love.
Okay.
And then I have stuff I did like that I'll mention later. But first plot point being the false dragon plot point. I know probably goes somewhere in the following books, but one of my, maybe this is why it affected my emotional impact as well. It was, I think, the biggest B plot. Obviously, there's the Eye of the World. It's the big plot. Yep. I think the biggest secondary plot, from my perspective reading it, you could correct me if I'm wrong, was the false dragon. It was very interesting. And I was looking more forward to the false dragon than I was to the Eye of the World. Like 100%. Way more invested in that. And the false dragon meeting was very underwhelming, where we saw his face for a little bit, and then it meandered into this very cliche princess and prince situation where he's climbing there. It happens to be the castle, and it's
Well, do you know why? Like, so I think I can spoil this because it's in this book.
If it's in this
I'm not
book,
spoiling anything.
Go ahead.
But in more of an explanation of there are moments, this very specific moments in the first book where Rand does something very strange and very out of character and very weird. And it feels like a plot, like him climbing the tower, like climbing the castle wall. Stupid.
No, I don't think I'm not even saying stupid or smart.
Well, no, it's odd. And that's because that actually is the madness.
The madness.
Don't you know?
No, from him being the one, right?
No.
The chosen one?
He's a male channeler.
Yeah, the chosen one.
And every time he uses the power, he actually goes a little mad.
No,
and there's moments like that, and where he goes, the fact that he was able to climb that high, that ferociously.
He was running from the...
No.
He was running from the, what is it?
Pat on fade.
Parrot fade, okay.
But no, because after he fell down, he kind of went like, wait, I climbed that? What was with me? And the fact that he was climbing up and his hands were bleeding, like he was going nuts while doing it. So,
I get you. It's not about if it was smart or dumb decision. I'm not even focused on that decision. It's just where the plot went of going from the false dragon being the thing, and then all of a sudden it diverges into the very cliche prince-princess thing. I happened to climb that one. Now, whether he went madness and then happened to climb the castle, I'm just like, okay. And it didn't help his character when the princess was obviously a princess, and then she reveals she's a princess. He goes, "Whoa, you're a princess." It was just very clear to me. Like the second introduction of her being stoic and demanding his authority, the way Robert Jordan wrote it, was just instantly princess. They were royalty, and then Rand was just dumb about it, and then figured out by the end.
She could be just nobility. That to be like, oh yeah, it's the princess, like. He's meant a lot of those things.
I guess to double down on that, then
he's ignorant.
Well, he's ignorant, but to me, the reader, I'm not. So to me, the reader, it's how it's written. So Rand could be, but me, the reader, I'm not satisfied by that, especially because of the constant lacking of subversion throughout the story. So I knew it was the prince and princess. So I was like, all right, it's going in that direction. I did like the queen. I should say I liked the queen in her reasoning. I'll say a thing I liked. I'm sorry for being so drab. But I need these notes for later when I'm on book 12 and I'm loving it, and I can look back and go, Austin, you suck.
Just the same way that whenever you like something, I gotta be negative. You're looking like Richard's too happy about this.
Yeah, how do you feel? How do you feel when you give Stormlight an 8 instead of a 9, huh?
Yeah.
But you notice? No. I want to make this point now. I want to make this point that I am talking about Wheel Time as I should, giving it a 4. You talk about Stormlight like this, and you give it an 8. Remember that. You talk about Stormlight giving it 8 5s, and you talk as I'm talking right now. I genuinely didn't like this, so I get the right to talk like this, okay?
That's fair.
Thank you. So with the false dragon, I was really excited for that scene. And it didn't
Raffo.
give... No, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. I know something will happen in the future, and you saying that especially. But I'm expecting something to happen in the following books. But as far as this book goes, I was like, yeah, all right. That's where I was left, and I did like the. Oh, sorry, I was going into something I liked, but then you got me on my tangent. So something I did like the Queen's reasoning for believing Rand. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
She had 3 points. I believe one of them was. She was in Emmonsfield once and heard the accents. He has the accent. And the second reason the Queen gave for believing Rand's story was no one would claim they're an Emmonsfielder that looks like that.
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
That's a stupid lie.
So I went, oh, that's a good point. And then I think her third reason was not listening to the voice in her head that was being suspicious, whatever. But
Elida.
Sorry? Elida.
Her counselor.
No. In her reasoning she was giving, the third one was like she's not listening to that voice in her head. I thought, or it was like, I forget the exact thing. I don't think it was about Elida, but yes, you're right.
But she was giving the benefit of the. Yeah. There is no proof, and she can't. She's going to uphold.
That was
the
great
law.
Reasoning.
Yeah,
I was like, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That really does. So I was satisfied with that. But on that whole point, do you have anything to say? Don't spoil False Dragon, but do you see where I'm coming from with that scene and the payoff?
I will say that the Eye of the World is the ending is the worst part of the book for me.
I didn't like the ending either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Let's talk about
there,
that.
But it's not as like. That would be the biggest thing I would change. if I think even Robert Jordan probably would.
Really?
Mainly because he wrote the first book with he had all these plans, but he had to end it in a way where if he didn't get picked up, he could stop there and like it would be okay-ish satisfying, but he didn't know how well it would do. So he ended it in a way where he could continue, but if it's not picked up and it's not published, then it can stop there.
Okay.
And yeah, I think he probably would have done things differently if he could just go forward with it. So,
well,
yeah,
big point on the ending. That was my I'll skip the second point. Go right to ending.
Mm-hmm.
I was very underwhelmed by the ending. And you know what's strange? I expected this pod to go a different direction of like you liking it way more than
no.
You're very indifferent about it. It seems like.
Yeah, mostly. I enjoyed it way more than you.
Of course, yeah.
Definitely.
Of course,
even on my first read through, I think I enjoyed it more than you. I was kind of just with the ride, and I was enjoying it for what it was. Actually, I think I read The Eye of the World and Wheel of Time before I read Lord of the Rings.
You did, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, that might affect it too.
I didn't have those direct connections right off the bat. Like, yeah, I could connect it to the movies, but I didn't have that. Like, I don't think I was actively thinking of the connection between Padon Fane and Gollum. And now that you say it, like, yeah, it's obvious. It's an obvious connection. I did not notice.
That was one that bugged me the most, actually, out of all of them, because that continued throughout the story, whereas a lot of the things that were taken from attributed and also derivative, I'll keep saying those two things, of Tolkien, a lot of them were in the first half of the book. Like, the good chunk of them were. And then it started going in a different direction, but then the Fane part was still there consistent throughout the book. So I was like, I just couldn't get it out of my head. It wasn't. Anyways, you said it, so I won't beat it to death.
Especially past that, it's very different going forward.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
well,
it's
with the ending though. Something I found very interesting was, so you watched season 1 of Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
And one of the things you said is like they toyed around with who the dragon was.
Yeah.
A lot. As I was reading the book, obviously it's Rand from the beginning.
Yeah, it's all his perspective.
It's all his perspective, but constantly throughout the nightmares and the Dark One doesn't know who it is. We can assume it's Rand. Also, I knew enough about the pop culture of Wheel of Time to know it's Rand. I knew that much. Mm-hmm. But the book also doesn't tell you it's Rand until the very big reveal at the end. The last thing is Moraine going, the dragon has returned. And it's Rand. Like, that's the reveal. So for that ending to happen, and it's obvious since the beginning, and it's also toyed around with, we don't know, is it Perrin? Is it Matt? Is it Rand? I think the book kept that up. It kept that going throughout, and just what the payoff wasn't there. I wasn't surprised by it. It wasn't a satisfying ending because of that.
To be fair, I think even when I was first reading it, I did not know he was the dragon going in. Like, because you knew something was off, like he's the main character, like he's being searched for, but it's not an immediate connection until the end. It makes sense by the end, but I was a bit more surprised than.
Okay.
I don't know. I wasn't completely surprised, but I wasn't totally like reading through the book going, oh yeah, Rand's the dragon. I was like, at best, I was like, oh, he can channel.
Okay.
That's as much as I remember on my first read through.
Right. It's tough to think back to that first one. So
yeah.
But on the second read through, was your perspective any different?
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Like I'm seeing the perspective. I know he's the dragon going through, and so I'm interested in seeing all the little clues laid about in the dreams, and I'm paying attention to all the little stuff. And there's a pretty big twist of like, I'm kind of laughing at some of the dream sequences, going like, oh, huh. And just some stuff later on of like, you kind of seeing the master plan at work.
Okay.
And the long game that the Dark One plays. And from all the way back then. And so that's kind of fun for me to read.
That was, plot-wise, one of my favorite parts about the book was the Dark One's constant threat and the dreams having actual consequences, like the rat's spines being broke. So I liked those scenes. It caught another complaint about the book. It was a very consistent tone, which is not a bad thing to say. It's just it felt very on beat. and nothing wrong with being on beat. It's just that there wasn't enough diversion for me to be signaled like, all right, this is more important than that scene over there. It just all felt like, I mean, Jordan has such a huge world here. Everything he mentions is important. That's the problem. So for me, I'm sitting there as a reader going, all right, so Camelin and Tarvalin are important, and everything else. So I was left in a place where, I mean, to compare this to Way of Kings, to Stormlight, for example. With Way of Kings, one complaint about, we'll get into world building, but even just plot-wise, it all takes place, there's Kharbranth and the Shattered Plains. So for me, like when I'm reading that story, I'm way more invested in a lot of it because I know that place is important. Like the Shattered Plains is where we are, Kharbranth is where we are, Alethkar is where we are. I got it. I'm here. Reshi could go screw itself right now. I don't know about Reshi, right? So it's there. Yeah. So with this, it's such a big, expansive thing that I didn't know what was super important. And I guess to compare it to Tolkien as well, with Fellowship even, going place to place. I even felt that I don't know how to explain how he did it differently, but each place was very explored in Tolkien's world. I mean, it's the best of the best. That when you go from the Shire, then to Bree, Prancing Pony, every place felt very real. I didn't feel that as much with Wheel of Time throughout this journey here.
See, I would actually disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
There are certain places in Lord, like in Middle Earth, definitely feel really real.
Yeah.
The Shire being, I think, the best of it. Bree, I'm not exactly sure how, like, yeah, it's fine. I wouldn't say it's a standout, like, oh yeah, it feels so real.
You know what stood out to me is like he puts Butterbeer in there. Like that's not in the movies, and I love Butterbeer. Oh, Butterbeer's in the movies. He's just a very small part of it. Yeah. That's where they meet. That's where they meet Strider, right?
Yep.
And it just feels very. I mean, I'm such a fanatic of Lord of the Rings. Like I guess it comes from me. Okay, you know what the difference might be as well. It's more confirmation bias of like I've read Lord of the Rings, I've watched the movies, I've looked up the stuff. Whereas this is my first read through, so of course Bree is gonna feel more real to me than even Camelin because I don't know much about Camelin yet.
Versus after going through 13 books, like so how Sanderson kind of structures where he kind of like starts in a place and thoroughly explores that one place when you're there.
Yeah.
This is spread, like you're introduced to a bunch of places and you will further explore them later, but you are jumping around all the time. Right. You're further exploring it over a longer time. You're touching the water on these places and you're going to go in deep in all the places as well, but over the 14 books. It's not like the book one, it's all about Camelin and then later you abandon it. No, it's a constant thing. Like the fact that Emmons Field, it like that's a unique thing that I just think like, oh yeah, you're never gonna go back there.
It's gone.
It's gone. Like okay, we're done, and that's in the past.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, no. I'll spoil on that one. Like, no, Emmons Field comes back and it's important.
Okay,
and you're explored the people and the location and all that more. So
yeah, so maybe I can't make the comparison to Lord of the Rings because I just know it way more. But I'll make the comparison with Stormland. Stay on that where, just as you said. It's the Shattered Plains, like you got that down. You know your read through. You got that. But whereas with this, it was hard for me to go. All right, this place is important. This place is important because I'm sure they all are. So it's hard. Yeah, it was hard to grasp me in the plot and go like this. This is the thing.
That's fine. The main thing is it's hard to really judge the. Like I can judge the first book more again negatively as a whole, but like.
As a whole series, it's different. I get
it's structured a certain way, and it's hard to judge. Like it's intended to be a certain way. It's hard to judge it when that's not how it was intended.
Got it.
You know, I mean, it's supposed to be spread out through a whole long series, so you're not supposed to know in depth about everything quite yet.
What did you think about? You good with that plot point?
Yeah,
I got another list.
Let's go into.
What did you think about the land?
Oh, okay.
You want this to be a long video or not?
Okay,
doing this for you. So what did you think about Lan and Wisdom? How that relationship unfolded.
Here, the more interesting thing with them is you don't see, like you see little inklings of it.
Yeah.
You see a little twinkle in her eye a little bit in both of them. And then later it's more like you kind of go away and then you kind of come back and it kind of all hits you at once. I think you don't really see them falling in love that's not what you really see, but you see the slow development of like why they did. It's almost like you see the answer before the question. You see that you like, oh, they have fallen in love, and you go, why is it? And then you see through their interactions what they respect about each other, and like you go, oh, I see why Nynaeve fell in love with Lan.
I have a question for you then. How do, like, let's say I was watching this channel.
Yeah.
How do I participate and get into like talking books with us? How does that happen?
Oh my God, what an interesting segue.
Did I do that well this time?
Think you did that this well.
You make fun of my segues a lot. I just wanted to try.
That's pretty good. But if they wanted to actually talk to us about Nynaeve and Lan's love life, they could actually join our Patreon down below. If you're watching this long and you want to talk to us more about Wheel of Time and a bunch of other books, you could support us and join our exclusive Discord where we have once a month. We have a exclusive book club where we read a book and talk about it with you guys. It's a ton of fun.
We got 2 this weekend, actually. Red Rising we're discussing, and Annihilation.
Yep.
But okay, back to the question. So the answer before the question.
Yeah.
You get that. That's an interesting, because I wanted to ask you that. Well, I did ask you that. Yeah. Because I'm bold and I ask questions. I wanted to ask you that because I was curious on the reread if it was more, you could see the hints. Yeah. Because on a first read, it hit me like, okay, that it sprung out of, I'm sure it wasn't out of nowhere. I'm sure there were hints I probably missed.
There are quite a few.
I was positive. So as an emotional payoff, so when that happened, I went, 1, okay, I definitely missed something here. I'm definitely stupid. I definitely missed something. And 2, that sucks because now I'm not that invested in the relationship right now. So
it definitely is one of the strongest relationships in the story. I will say the biggest negative for Robert Jordan's writing is his romantic relationships.
And it's a fantasy book.
Yeah. There's a couple that are
wait.
bad.
There's no good romance?
There's a couple. Okay. Pretty
I'm
good.
lowering my rating to a 2. I come for good romance. I'm a romance guy.
I like Lan and Nynaeve.
I really am a romance guy.
I like Lan and Nynaeve quite a bit. So
I'm sorry. This is just too good of a transition. The whole romance thing. My favorite part about the book was how Rand always said that Perrin had, he was always good with the ladies, and Perrin always said, Rand, I wish I was good as Rand with the ladies. Yeah. That was neat.
I think that right there is a good example of what I like so much about the Wheel of Time is you see how different people's perspectives are and how everyone's kind of wrong.
I like that.
No one has the right perspective. And how vastly different one perspective can be, even on something like the Dark One.
Right.
Like everyone can you as the reader are screaming, going like, you're all on the same side, you idiots. Right, just work together. And yet for some reason they have such a twisted version of reality where they're just all wrong and idiots. And you, the reader, can kind of just sit back and look. Wow. And that right there is a fun little example of that.
Yeah. Okay. That continues throughout the series.
Oh yeah, in bigger, more important things. But it is.
I'm so curious with book 2 because me not liking book 1, I don't know how much that'll affect the character. So I don't know. It doesn't start over the story, of course, but
the characters are immediately more interesting because so especially
don't give anything away. Yeah.
I'm just giving you like your big problem with Rand is kind of being boring and bland. He's not boring and bland. There are real stakes. There's real personal conflict and struggle with him.
Something interesting too with Rand al'Thor. I mean, it's Norse inspired. There's a lot of that there. I didn't know this, but Beltane is apparently Norse inspired. Did you know that? Okay, yeah, I didn't. Man, you know everything about Wheel of Time. I thought I could get you with a quick fun fact. No,
I got that one.
But okay, so Rand's not as bland in the second book.
Definitely not.
Okay,
and
very good.
All of the characters kind of have a bit more, except Matt. Okay. Matt is still frustrating in book 2.
All right, you want to get onto dialogue and prose?
Yeah.
What was your score for that?
A 6.5.
Okay, I gave it a dead 5. Dead 5.
I think the dialogue is well written and very fun and unique voices between all the characters. They're just, I just find them all very unique. That's a big part for me. And
they have distinct voices for you.
Yeah, and I like the action. It's different than how modern fantasy writes action, and this is incredibly different. And I just kind of get into it. I like all of the sword form dances and talking about it, and those are very fun for me. I don't know why, it just works. and then how they describe the magic is very cool.
Neat.
So that and the writing descriptions of the world makes it so vivid that I can really see myself there.
That's great.
So
also with the writing style, did you find yourself reading on the second time? So on this reread that you had, did you find a paragraph or a description that you went, wow, I didn't realize?
So many
like
times.
one of those descriptions that you just went, I didn't even realize he had that described, or that's whoa.
But there's so many like little tiny hints, so I can't spoil it.
Mm.
But you do have to distrust the narrator when describing things. That there's stuff that the way it's described, you kind of look at it and it's a reference to something else. And
interesting.
It's something you imagine, something that you know of that's being described in a way that's someone like you are. Two people are looking at something, you know what it is, and someone else doesn't know what it is, and they're describing it to you.
Okay.
So there's plenty of those where you go, I can only catch it on the second read through, or if you're paying attention to the descriptions of the world. And so, yeah, I very much enjoyed all those.
Dialogue and prose is always the most curveball thing for stories, because I unabashedly give, is that how you say it? Unabashedly or unabashedly?
Unabashedly?
Sure. So I say this without stuttering, that Sanderson's prose I think is like a 9.5 out of 10. I love his prose. And plenty of people will say I'm stupid, and those plenty of people, it's you every time you say it.
Yeah.
So it's, you give his prose like 7/8. You like it.
No, it's good.
I really think it's amazing prose. And because I never have to reread, we'll get into another Sanderson. We say that with all our Sanderson stuff. But I love his prose. Because I don't think you have to be poetic. I don't think you have to have purple prose. Everyone's going for a different thing. And Sanderson's going for one thing, and he does it expertly. Just like Terry Pratchett goes for his thing, does it expertly, just like Tolkien does. So when I'm looking at the prose of this, I'm not faulting it for not being poetic or enough, or not being simple enough. One of the big things for me was the tone, going back to, I put some of this in plot, but the tone of the dialogue, it just felt very just a constant beep, and there was no cacophony in there. There was no dissonance in there. There was no am I getting you with these words? Am I getting a little
I get you.
Okay. But so it was very much, it felt repetitive. And then I noted sometimes, I wrote these down while I was reading it, just because I went like, okay. And this was written in the 90s, so maybe time affects how we look back on these phrases. But for example, the phrase, she let go of a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. So he let go of a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. One of those things. Or he'll say something, wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Those kind of classic sayings, which, how do I judge that? Because I've heard it 1,000 times. But in the 90s, was it heard 1,000 times? I don't know. It's probably newer.
That's part of the thing with...
It's tough to judge. And then
people looking back on Wheels, even later books, where the first book is clearly more classic fantasy, homage to Tolkien, and then later it becomes a great bridge between classic and modern fantasy. The Wheel of Time sets the trend of what a lot of modern fantasy currently does. And the tropes that modern fantasy gives, Wheel of Time did it first. And so, yeah, that's an interesting thing. You're probably going to come
those
across
phrases,
things.
though. I want to see how long those phrases have been there.
They've probably been around a little. I've just read that more in classic fantasy. It's an older phrase. I just don't see it around that often nowadays.
Oh yeah, because it's been used so often. And just with some of his things, I noticed there was, like, he would say a character's angry, then they'd show that anger. Or there's little things that I noticed that I just went, okay, I had to think about it. It wasn't a read that I just went through and was enthralled with the dialogue. Was easy to go. It was simple enough to, just like Sanderson's prose, a simple way.
Yeah.
But there was too many, like land, for example, was described as being like an onion, peel the layers down. I'm like, okay, that onion, I've heard that analogy. And I know this is ironic. I have terrible analogies on this pod. That's why I try to come up with sayings like teetering my totter, because I think that's a thing that's going to catch on. And you're gonna look back to this Tutor Ramble podcast, be like, I remember when I was one of those cool kids who said teeter my totter when Austin said it back in episode 64, whenever I said it first.
65.
Well, I think I said it last episode too. I've been really trying to stamp this one, okay? I'm trying to get it out there. So teeter my totter in the comments if you've been listening this long.
Don't
How about
do that to me. Don't do it. No,
do that.
Please.
Yes.
Please
yes.
don't torture me.
So
I read the comments. Don't make me read that.
So, not much else to say with dialogue prose. Just give us
I think it's better than average, mainly because of descriptions. I think the descriptions are very good and well done, and
I see it.
That's about it.
I see it.
I will later give it better scores.
I'm being too civil, actually. I'm gonna hide that so you can't throw it back.
You hit me in the face with that. Well, okay, I guess.
Oh, I thought you were gonna throw it. You just turned an angry face.
There we go.
For listeners who don't have the visuals, I threw a plushie at him, and he's now turned it into a frown. We have a new plushie. It's been here. It's what are we gonna call the plushie? You want a name for him?
I mean, it does have a name.
What's the name?
I actually do forget. It's from Mistborn. I'm trying to remember the actual name of the character, but someone in the comments will let me know. I forget.
Okay.
The dog from Mistborn.
Or hey, people in the comments, name this for us and name it something different. How about that?
Sure.
Okay, that's fun. All right, the last section here, world building / magic system. What did you rate that out of 10?
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. So great. I gave it 5.5 out of 10. The highest category.
Ooh.
This is where I guess you're going to disagree the most with me. Because
I do.
Yeah. So you definitely giving it out of 10 was great. Loved it.
Yeah.
So that high rating. So why does it deserve that? What do you love about?
Mainly because everything pays off. The history is actually all well thought out.
Gotcha.
The characters have a intimate connection to the world, and all that is just masterfully done. And now a lot of that is I'm seeing the seeds, and I'm giving.
You've read ahead. Yep.
I have to give it credit for I'm noticing things on the reread. I'm going, oh, okay. That's actually
I could see that.
Important. I have to give it credit for that. Because in the first read through, sure, I can maybe dock it lower. Mainly, I could see that because I don't see where it's going. I think it's well described and a very interesting world, and I'm fascinated by the world of dreams. I'm fascinated by the Perrin with the wolves and the Wolf Brother stuff and what's going on with that, and Elias.
The Tinkers.
The Tinkers, I think, are really well done. I think they're a great addition to the world.
Searching for that song.
I love Loyal and the Ogier. I think great. All these different elements, I think they're so well done. I love the idea of a Gleeman. So many different stories have the bard character, and it's just a bard. That's all it is. And yet, no, in Wheel of Time, they have the patched cloaks. That's more like a rainbow of patches. They have a certain they're not the same as a bard. Gleemen are very specific.
Yeah,
they have a specific aesthetic. They have a different air around them. I just love that attention to detail on how the world is made, and it makes it so real to me. So I give it that 8 very proudly. I think even in book 1, it's done very well. Very well.
This is the one score that I could be most convinced to raise, and probably on a reread as well. Unfortunately for me, it's hard to differentiate, but a lot of the times the world to me is tied with emotion. So the more I'm caring about a scene and something, the more it'll be vivid to me. The more I'll be caring in the moment. So it definitely drags in with my other scores of going, okay, how much did I care about the world? The world could be phenomenal, 10. If you just had, let's say, the Lord of the Rings didn't exist, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King. All that exists was the Silmarillion. That's it. If I read the Silmarillion and then was reading the world, I wouldn't know what to do with it, because obviously it's the most in-depth world ever. But I don't care about characters in that world, because what characters are there to compel me to love the world? What plot is there to compel me? So if I was just...
Well, you haven't read the Silmarillion. There are some really good stories and characters
I'm sure there
to get
are.
behind.
I'm sure there are. Okay, then how about the history of Lord of the Rings? Or something, you get what I'm saying, where it's a book outside the story. So the appendix of the Lord of the Rings, that's all it was just telling... So something along those lines where the story
also
didn't...
the appendixes
in Return of the King.
You would say the appendices.
The appendices, yeah. You know what? I'm starting to not like you.
Starting.
Episode 65.
Well, we've started off the video. I've been not liking you this whole video.
So, but you get what I'm saying there with, if it was just world building, it's hard to rate like how much I love the world. So it definitely is affected by emotional impact, but why I don't give it higher, I do give it it's above a 5. We're critical on here. You'll see a lot of our ratings suck. I'm sorry, people. But with giving it the 5.5, it goes back to that plot detail of I couldn't focus on what was uber important in the story. We were in a lot of places, and I was like, okay, this or this. I was all over the place, so there's a lot of things. This is what I would say. Book 1, The Eye of the World. So not talking about the series, but book 1, Eye of the World, is very wide but not deep. Book 1. Yes. I'm sure it gets deep later on, but just there's a lot of stuff, and there were elements.
With a caveat.
Okay.
The main thing is there is a lot of detail even on the surface level. Like I was talking with the Gleeman, but it goes further beyond that. The idea of the Illuminators, which is briefly hinted on, and then just talked further about there's so many little details added and sprinkled in, even though you're only touching on certain locations.
I can remember too.
Makes it very vividly.
I even remember. I think the Ogier Loyal was explaining. He's the Ogier, right?
Yes.
So Loyal was explaining that he's 90 years old, and the last time they were there were generations ago during the 100-Year War, and it was, this is just from memory. Like I remember it because it was very. I could remember the world building there, but when he did world build, it was info dumpy at times. It wasn't didn't feel smooth with the narrative. So a lot of things came on top. I think he did a much better job when it came like the Tinkers and stuff like that. But there were a lot of situations where it had to be told, and it's. I
guess I was just in this. That's just the style, and I'm kind of into it.
Sure.
I just don't notice it.
Sure, and I'm sure, and my bias is coming out because I'm sure Lord of the Rings also does this. So Lord of the Rings
does it a lot.
Yeah,
a lot of info.
But here's the exception.
But you're down for it.
Exactly, that's the exception. Is I'm down for it because
see with Loyal, like Loyal is like telling a story and like that's an info dump, but. Yeah,
Lord of the Rings, they're just singing songs and telling you about the past 3 ages. Yeah,
Gandalf literally starts going into the history. Like it just starts telling you.
But you know, the difference. Honestly, though, the difference for me is like I'm just in love with Gandalf. I'm already hooked in the story. So it's all like emotion drags into the world for me. It's just it's hard to separate that. And I imagine I'll love the world more down the line.
I do hope you keep an open mind going into the other books.
I hope there sounds like I think I'm coming in open mind. Does it sound like I'm?
No, I'm just worried like it's going to be. Because I've noticed like the difference between you and I on reading it is there's stuff that like now that you mention I guess I can maybe knock or like clearly just stuff that we like I just don't pay attention to that you do.
We're two different readers.
And, yeah.
So not just that we're two different individuals. I've noticed throughout our reviews. I think you are a world first reader. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you go into fantasy, you want the world. And then the characters in that are like a huge plus. Obviously, you love your characters, but you're there for the world, the culture, the history, and you're interested in everything that goes on there and what leads from that. So you kind of look big to small.
Yeah.
I go into things, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but every story I've ever read, I always go small to big with characters are the most important thing ever. And my push is that, and then from those characters spring then the world, the plot, the conflicts, everything comes from that. Whereas you could read. Well,
there's just also some details that.
Well, is that right or wrong? Would you say?
I guess so.
Okay.
I guess I agree. I'm not.
We can both
sure.
love worlds and love characters. I guess it's a small difference that changes our opinions on books typically.
I guess so.
Because if I walked into Wheel of Time, imagine this, and I focused a lot less on characters, like the main character, like you're even saying, Rand is. He's like, what is there to love here? You've read fantasy. There's so many better characters than Rand. Like, even in an okay book, better character than Rand. So if you go into a book and forget Rand for a second, you're just going in there, the world of Wheel of Time, the map, the details. You're going in that perspective, you're going to love it a lot more because you're focusing on that while I'm focusing on like, all right, so how's Rand going to interact with that world? That's just where my mind goes. So.
Which is why I'm happy for like going forward because Rand is the best written character in fantasy.
Whoa. I can't. Hey.
I'm just saying, like, the end, by the end, like, he is.
Okay.
He just, on an objective level, he's the best written character.
Yeah. I can't wait to see
the greatest character journey I've ever read.
You know what? You're going to get payback with me next week or 2 weeks from now. I don't know when it will upload it, but we haven't recorded yet. We're going to record a Red Rising review.
Oh, yeah. You better believe I'm going to start bringing in some negativity.
Just some snippets. I'll let a sneak peek here.
Yeah.
When we talk about Red Rising, I don't even want to say anything else other than I am floored. I am floored, and I know you don't love it as much as me. We're going to talk Red Rising, and
I still like it a lot.
I know you do, but not as much as me. Nobody likes it more than I do. Look, listen, nobody likes things more than me. More than me.
I am the biggest fan. I like the book more.
I hate Wheel of Time more than you do. Yeah. We are terrible impersonators. So, all right, this has been another... I was going to say another Wheel of Time episode, but it was our first. So,
our first. Let us know how wrong Austin was in the comments below, and if you're looking forward to book 2, hopefully it'll come out in about a month.
I will say this, a little snippet as well, to prep for this pod. So I wrote down all my thoughts. I also looked up a bunch of reviews, and I looked up a bunch of comments. And I was looking at I looked up bad reviews, good reviews. I went on Goodreads. I read the 1 stars, the 5 stars, everything to get an atmosphere for how this conversation usually goes. My actual thoughts are it's a 1, it's trash. I just no. But I was looking at what the general consensus was, and I think you're in the spot of the consensus where if you're fans of the series, you read the 14 books, you look back on book 1, and it's like, it's great. It started my favorite series. This is awesome. Yeah. Who doesn't like this stuff? And then all the DNFers that stopped after book 1 or book 4 talk negatively about this, typically. So you being an hour and a half into this, most likely like the book. So definitely comment negatively on me and why I'm wrong. I do want to hear more positivity of the book in the comments to see what I missed and maybe some things because you weren't.
Here's the thing: fans of Wheel of Time are probably its biggest critics, and yet still are like fans of the Wheel of Time. It's unique.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings fans will defend it. Like, no, it's flawless. It's perfect.
Was that an attack on me?
Yes.
I'm one of those freaking weirdo nerds that the movies and books are literally 10 out of 10. If you say any flaw about either...
I have quite a few, but I'm just saying. I've mentioned them several times, and I know you agree with
Here's
me,
the thing. You know I do, but no, it has 0 flaws. I'm that guy.
Wheel of Time, I can give the book a 6, and I can talk about all these different flaws to the series, and yet I will still proudly say it's my favorite book series ever. And it just is. And I don't know how to explain that. Like, when a lot of times when someone criticizes your favorite thing, you get defensive and you're angry that they don't see it the way you do.
Yeah.
Wheel of Time fans are like, oh yeah, no, that's awful. It's an awful part of it. It's still the best anyway.
Well,
I don't care.
If I'm still negative after book 4, you might be, or book 14, you'll be like, Austin,
yeah,
I don't know.
Like if you somehow say like book 2 is worse or about the same, I'll be like, no. That's where you're wrong. Like book 2
objectively it's better, right?
Well, no, I'm listening to all your criticisms and going like, yeah, that's fixed in book 2. That's fixed in book 2. Yeah, that's fixed in book 2. I'm just going through all these things and going, yeah, like
good,
definitely. Even like your small thing of like, oh, we're not going deep enough into some of these locations.
Then it does, yeah.
Yeah, no, it does a much better balance of like doing more exploration, but then also a significant part is just diving deep into another place.
Great.
So.
What's one phrase or thing you'd want to leave it off with of your Wheel of Time, book 1, Eye of the World thoughts?
The seeds have been planted, and we will watch them grow.
Neat. Okay. Oh, I didn't even say this. This is the last thing I wanted to say.
I'm trying to sign off.
I know,
man.
but listen, just give it a second. Give it some time.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, can't believe I didn't mention this, but the wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
And you know what's hilarious about that saying? Every time I heard it, it's like your uncle just saying, it is what it is.
It is the Wheel of Time equivalent of
Wait, is that what people say in the fandom?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's effectively what it is.
I didn't read that in the fandom yet. I haven't okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, it's an effectively all that basically says is like, you know, fate is what it is. Right. Like,
oh, I can't believe you didn't mention this. I do like how the wheel, so you can change small things, but the overarching thing you can't.
Oh,
I like how the wheel works.
Time itself works. Yeah, I can't believe we didn't get into it.
I'm curious to see what that goes
forward. Much further.
Robert
like
said,
Jordan
the seeds are planted,
is a genius to actually build in plot armor into its magic and world building. Because that's effectively what it is.
Yeah.
Like,
Gotcha.
Fate is literally forcing things to, like, the world and time itself is literally forcing things to align and going like, no main character, come back here. You're doing this thing whether you like it or not.
Man. Okay. Do you want to sign us off?
All right, yeah, let's go off. Bye,
One more thing, everybody. I really wanted to say this.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.